On guys, today we're looking at Clemson, and welcome back to the channel where we're going to be previewing all of the ACC teams that I can get to before the start of the season. And this is from the perspective of a Duke fan. This is a Duke basketball channel first. So if you're looking for an outside perspective on your team, this is the video for you. So Clemson, listen, they had an awesome season last year. It was Coach Brownell's 14th season. This upcoming year will be his 15th, and it was their fourth tournament appearance under Brownell, who I think he's been a really solid coach for Clemson. They went 24-12 last season overall, 11-9, which was tied for fifth in the ACC, 0-1 in the ACC tournament, and then 3-1 losing to Alabama in the Elite Eight, in which was a rematch that Clemson won earlier in the season. And I think that's an important place to talk, because Clemson, the first couple of months of the season, was really strong. They were playing great basketball. They had, I believe it was a 10-1 non-conference record, and they were rolling. And then they hit a rough spot in conference play, lost a few games. That's how they end up at 11-9 in the conference and tied for fifth, because I thought they were one of the top three teams in the conference and certainly ahead of Virginia, but they kind of lost their rhythm. And in the NCAA tournament, the game against New Mexico, it was a very popular pick to pick New Mexico, and I fell victim to that. I picked New Mexico because I felt like Clemson had peaked maybe too soon. And boy, was I wrong. You know, they really were able to find a rhythm. Chase Hunter was really good for them down the stretch, along with their star player, P.J. Hall. And they found a rhythm through their defense, which was really disruptive for a lot of teams. They just couldn't get into rhythm. Against Arizona, Arizona was just constantly behind. It felt like the whole game. They just couldn't find a rhythm against Clemson, and you got to give a lot of credit to Clemson for what they were able to do. So let's move ahead. Let's look at this upcoming season now as we go through the roster, and then like we do in each one of these videos, I'm going to go over my projected lineup and rotation and the schedule and predictions. So if you enjoyed so far, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel for more college basketball and then NBA draft content. So the roster, who's gone, who's back, and who's new. Who's gone? Well, P.J. Hall, he is out of eligibility. He went on to the NBA. Joe Girard is gone. He had a really productive 1 year at Clemson. And then 4 rotation players transferred out, 3 of which were significant rotation players. R.J. Godfrey transferred. Jack Clark transferred. I guess really 2. Josh Beadle also transferred, and Alex Hemingway transferred as well. Hemingway only played in a handful of games. I believe he was injured. Beadle was a bit rotation player. He did play in the majority of the games, but 10 minutes or so. Godfrey and Clark were certainly significant rotation players, more so Clark than Godfrey, but they each played in the majority of the games. And with that being said, let's move into who's back. Ian Shefflin, he's one of my favorite players in college basketball. He's a weird guy to maybe have as your favorite player or one of your favorite players, but I just love the way he impacts the game without scoring. He's a great rebounder. He can pass. He's probably a little bit of an underrated defender. He just makes winning plays, and I think there's a lot of value for somebody like that. Chase Hunter is back for his 6th season at Clemson. Chauncey Wiggins is back as well. He's a really big wing forward for them. And then Dylan Hunter, Chase Hunter's brother, is also back, who was, one of their guards off the bench along with Josh Beadle last season. So who's new? The one thing I really like about what Coach Brownell did is he went out and got himself some clear and obvious replacements for his roster. So what do I mean by that? Well, Victor Lakin was brought in as a P.J. Hall replacement. And this is from my perspective. I want to make that clear. He's a big from Cincinnati who can score, stretch the floor a little bit, not quite as good as P.J. Hall, but it certainly can score and is a can score in like a few different ways, can rebound. So he's a nice replacement for PJ Hall. Then, in almost like a college basketball trade, Jaden Zachary was brought in from Boston College. So Josh Beadle went to Boston College. Jaden Zachary comes back. But I see him more as the replacement for Joe Girard than Beadle. They play differently. You know, Girard is an offense guy with not great defensive ability, whereas Zachary is a good defender who can score, but he's not the shooter that Girard is in terms of volume. Then after that, it's just more so just guys they brought in. So the two were kind of like for like replacements are those two players. Christian Reeves was brought in as a big from Duke. As a Duke fan, I'll say I like Reeves. I think he can provide quality minutes as your backup center. He's got great size at 7'1", 7'2", depending on where you look. He can protect the rim and he can finish around the basket. Don't look for him to do much more than that, but he knows his role and he knows what he's good at. And then they brought in a 3-man freshman class according to 24/7 Sports. Dallas Thomas, a 6'9" forward. Ace Buckner, a 6'3" guard. And Dell Jones, a 6'2" guard. All ranked between 110 and 170 on 24/7 Sports, which to me means, Dell Jones could end up being the best player, or Dallas Thomas. I think once you start getting out to that point in the rankings, there's not much of a difference between each guy. So, how do I see the lineup and rotation shaken out for Clemson? Well, like I mentioned before, I think there's a couple of clear replacements, and I think the starting lineup kind of fits itself, if you will. So I think Zachary goes into the Joe Girard role. Chase Hunter will still start. Chauncey Wiggins started a few games last year, and Jack Clark kind of took his spot towards the end of the season. I think he regains that spot now that Clark has moved on. Ian Shefflin continues to be the starting power forward, and Victor Lakin slides in at the center spot, which means Dylan Hunter, Christian Reeves, Dallas Thomas, and Ace Buckner and or Dell Jones are, round out your 9-man rotation. That seemed to be about what Coach Brownell liked to get to last season, so that's about as far as I took it for Clemson. Now, quickly, I want to mention, I think this team is going to be really strong defensively, and my concern for this team is their three-point shooting. Losing PJ Hall, who could stretch the floor a little bit, but certainly Joe Girard. The guy, Zachary did hit around 40%, but he made it was on like 2 attempts per game, whereas Joe Girard made over 40% on 7 attempts per game, which is a big difference. I mean, even PJ Hall was at 4.5 attempts per game, and Lakin is a guy who was shooting like 1-ish attempts per game. So that's where I see their strengths and weaknesses heading into the season. Now, going over the schedule, and I'll give you guys my predictions here for Clemson. So, non-conference. They've got an away game at Boise State. They'll play in like a mini tournament in Florida against San Francisco and then either Penn State or Fordham. They'll have a game at home against Kentucky in the SEC ACC Challenge. They'll have another game at home against Memphis, and they'll go on the road to take on South Carolina. Which means, moving into the conference play, home and away games, they'll have Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Virginia Tech. I think Georgia Tech is going to be pretty solid this year. Florida State, I think, maybe similar to last year, maybe a little bit better. So they've got not the hardest home and away matchups, but certainly not the easiest either. Home, they'll have Cal, Duke, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Stanford, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. And on the road, it will be Boston College, Louisville, Miami, NC State, Pittsburgh, SMU, and Virginia. So, what do I predict their regular season to be? So last year, again, they were 11-9 in conference play. You take out the tournament games, which were a combined 3-2. So that gets you to 21-10 in the regular season, which 10-1 non-conference play. I just don't think they're going to be quite as good in the non-conference. They've got some tough games, particularly the road games with Boise State and South Carolina. I'm looking at, and I think Kentucky is going to be a tough one. So I got them going 9-2 non-conference this year. And I have them actually at the same conference record as last year. I just feel like last year they underperformed. That's in conference play. And while I don't think they're as good as they were last year, I think they can get to a similar record, which will put them at 20-11 for the regular season, which is just a win below where they were last year. I think their defense is going to carry them. I'm just a little concerned about their offense. So I'm curious what you guys think. Clemson fans, let me know in the comments below. If you're a fan of another team in the ACC and you want to see them profiled sooner than later, drop that in the comments below and I'll make sure to get to them. And with that, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.